Welcome to this podcast, Holistic Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanette. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Holistic Creators. My name is Swanette and I'm your host. Today, my guest is Jen Coken. Recognized by ABC, MSNBC, and TEDx, Jen Coken is an internationally acclaimed comedian, coach, speaker, and imposter syndrome expert. Jen has coached nearly 10,000 leaders in the last 30 years in both the public and private sectors. She is the no BS coach for irreverent, mission-driven women, executives in STEAM who crave their audacity to be themselves, want to own the agency of their position, and have confidence in the direction they are headed. Fortune 1000 CEOs to 7-figure founders trust Jen to shake things up with no apologies, no limits, and all the loves. So welcome to my show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here, Swanette. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what does it mean without BS? I have an idea, but it's like, okay, you're very straight.
Yes, I'm very direct with
Yes.
people. And I don't mean no BS like I'm mean or anything like that, but I just don't think we have time to waste in this life. It may seem like we have many years to live, but in fact, every moment is an opportunity for us to make a difference, for us to connect to who we truly are and fulfill our purpose. And so I call people out on their stuff. And I specifically say I'm the no BS coach because if you're not ready for that, it can seem shocking sometimes. Some people refer to it as my East Coast, New York attitude, but I never grew up on the East Coast. I've lived on the East Coast for a long time, but I grew up in the Midwest where everyone is nice, except being nice never served anybody except to get good service from the restaurant. My point is, when we're constricted by being nice, it just doesn't serve who we really are. It doesn't leave us with an authentic voice. Yeah.
I'm totally getting that. So it's the same with me. I'm very straight in what I'm doing, and I'm not the kind of people pleaser. So no, it's going deep and really understanding more about themselves. So
Yeah.
can you give us a little bit of an idea about your own journey, what you have been through, so that we also understand who are you as a person, and then of course who are you as a coach?
Absolutely. So I actually spent the majority of my career working in politics. My master's degree is in political campaign management, and I ran my first political campaign at the age of 21 and became completely disheartened by all of the backroom deal making and kind of went, I'm in graduate school at this point. So I've spent 6 years, and this is my master's thesis, was my campaign plan, and returned with my tail between my legs to my advisor and said, what the heck do I do? Like, I just, this has been my sole focus. And she introduced me to this whole genre of grassroots organizing, which before President Obama in the States was elected, even my dad would say, what is it you do for a living? And once he was elected, I'll never forget, my dad called me and he said, you're like President Obama. And okay, Dad, but literally I spent 30 years of my life getting people elected at the local, state, and national level in the US, worked on environmental policy, good government policy, spent a long career making a difference, which was really fulfilling up until the point it wasn't. And that point happened when Donald Trump was elected as our president in the US. And I kind of said, okay, I just can't be in the thick of it. I need to let other people move to the front, and I'll make a difference where I can. The interesting part about that journey, that was really the place where I learned my abilities to plan, to understand power, to understand our role as it connects to power and real power and perceived, and how we can make a difference and find a way to be empowered no matter our circumstances. At that same time, I was also a coach for an international personal growth and development company and led their programs for 16 years, which kept me sane and in the realm of what's possible versus the resignation of the political world. I ended both of those things around the same time because I was really searching for a larger expression of who I was. The work I was doing with the personal growth company was very cerebral, good stuff, Landmark Worldwide. They offer the Landmark Forum, really great stuff. But I realized I wanted a spiritual connection. I wanted how do I embody leadership, the somatic experience. I wanted the energetic experience. And so I left both things at the same time and went into business for myself as a coach. And I've been coaching people in this iteration for almost 8 years, and truly, at first, when you hang out your own shingle as a coach, whether you have a background like I did, or you go through and get a certification, you're kind of inundated with the way things ought to be as a coach. You should really do these programs, and I'm going to find you 5,000 clients in 90 days. And if all the promises and the bro marketing, right? You know what I'm talking about. And I just got so disillusioned because I knew the way other people were doing it wasn't aligned with my voice and who I was. And it took me a long time to figure that out. It probably took me 3 years of throwing spaghetti on the wall. And 2019, I had a big commercial client. I had a big corporate client and was traveling around the world working with them on a leadership development course. And I hated it. During the time I was there, I was providing for the team. I was being a team player, but behind the scenes, I was questioning myself, doubting myself. I felt like a fish out of water. And what I began to realize is that was my own version of imposter syndrome. And then I became really interested in this phenomenon of people experiencing feeling like an imposter and what was at the root of that. And that became the way that I transformed my life. Was I actually was able to look for the thread of where the mischief all started when I was a little kid and what happened. And as soon as I identified and disrupted that brain pattern, I had freedom. And then I had freedom to say, am I going to be direct in this instant? Am I going to be caring? Am I going to be confident? I could choose how I was going to show up and who I was going to be. And that became a really directive and intense journey for me of wanting to see other women empowered, because I feel like imposter syndrome is such a label. And I've heard stories of bosses saying to the people that you have imposter syndrome, you got to go fix that. I don't like it when people assign labels. And I truly believe that what we call imposter syndrome, and it's not just I believe it, I've seen it in my work, it is an amygdala hijack. It's a moment where the brain gets hijacked with fight, flight, or freeze. And the brain is really good at surviving and comes up with strategies to avoid that situation. That experience of imposter syndrome is truly your superpower because you've used it to have much success. And if you can recognize that, you can harness it and use that evil for good.
Yeah. Just for a little bit of definition for people who don't know what you're speaking about when you say imposter syndrome, can you give us a little bit of a definition or what you see, how this shows up in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So imposter syndrome isn't even a syndrome because a syndrome is a medical diagnosis. People use those words because the SEO lands, okay? The search optimization is better. It's actually imposter phenomenon and was identified by two researchers back in the 70s who were studying women who had high academic achievement and realizing those women felt like a fraud and were worried they'd be found out. And it's called a phenomenon because it's phenomenological. You experience it as lived. What happens is something triggers it, and then you have an experience of fear or worry or your palms sweating, like the body sensations are real. The reaction is real, but your thoughts aren't real. It's just the brain doing its thing. Just as recently as last year, 82% of workers were asked, do you ever feel like a fraud at work? Are you ever afraid you're going to be found out that you don't know what you're talking about? And 82% said yes. So, it doesn't matter who you are. I've coached 18-year-olds and members of Congress, wherever you are in the spectrum, all of us have had a moment of doubting ourselves. Nowadays, people have labeled some of that imposter syndrome. However, the coaches that are telling you all these tips to overcome it, those tips won't work. There's only one time we won't have imposter syndrome, and it's when we're dead, because there's really nothing to worry about at that point in time. And the other thing I find is when people experience it, they think they're the only one, and they don't realize the entire population and really famous people. Albert Einstein was worried he'd be found out a fraud. Maya Angelou, when she was working on her 12th book, tells the story of being afraid someone was going to knock at the door and tell her all things are off, nobody wants your books. Jennifer Lopez, before she came out with her most recent album, was worried nobody would buy it or like it. It's just human nature to have fear because the brain's job is to predict danger. It used to be physical danger, now it's psychological danger, except the brain can't discern between something that our life is endangered and you walk into work one morning and your boss says, see me in my office at 10 minutes. Ugh. I mean, that would like trigger anybody. You're like, why? And he's like, happy birthday. Here's a cake I bought for you. And you're immediately, you go to the worst. So it shows up in many ways for many people. Just know you're not alone. Everybody experiences it.
Yeah, so and this is also kind of a construction we have about our own reality.
Yes.
Yeah, what we expect, what would happen if we become visible, if we become our true authentic self, and people can figure out, oh, she's different than the role she's playing. And I can imagine, especially if you have been in politics, people play their role, but if you meet them in private, so to say, they're kind of different if they can't hold their role anymore. So can you go a little bit deeper into this between like playing a role and being truly who you are? And because if you're truly who you are, then perhaps there is nothing like this imposter syndrome, because you will always show up as a true person, as you are, with your own truth, with your own reality.
And this is such a great question, Swanette, because it really gets into my vision for the world. And my vision for the world is a world of people at home with themselves. Each and every person acknowledged, appreciated, and known for their unique contribution. And this is the work I do with women in STEAM because they're in male-dominated industries and don't see other women. And so you feel like you can't be yourself. You've got to be this very rigid kind of directorial male energy, for lack, unconscious male energy, for lack of a better term. I think when people get in touch, I'm going to say a two-part answer to what you asked. Still, imposter syndrome will never go away, but certainly if you're being true to yourself, it's much, much less likely to be there. When people are at home with themselves, when they're truly showing up as their whole human, their whole self, you feel like you have a taproot sunk deep into the earth. And you might consider what's going on in the world or what people are saying, but you're considering it from the viewpoint of who you are because you're so rock solid and you've built that foundation. And you can say, nope, that's for me. Yep, that's for me. Nope, what you're saying about me doesn't fit. Oh, yes, it does. Thank you for pointing it out. When we don't have that foundation, that taproot, it's like the wind can just knock us around. It's like those, I don't know if you've ever seen these out in the US outside of used car dealerships. They have these weird like blow up things that look like almost like scarecrows in a field, and they blow all around to like bring people's attention to the car dealership, and it's all air, right? That's sort of like a Michelin man, but very tall, right? And I think when people don't have that sense of that taproot, you feel like that thing being blown all over the place. When you're sunk, when you're rooted from your first chakra, rooted from your second and third chakra, the centers of creation, your personal power, then you can almost consider everything that's coming at you, situations, people, rather than thinking it's true. And when it comes to politics, it's interesting because you have to be a distinct person to get elected than you do once you're in office. And most people don't realize that. And that's a whole other podcast we could do probably. about that. But one of the things people always say to me is, man, you're just like your website. And you probably get that too. You look the same, you talk the same. Yeah, because I don't know how to be anybody else. I spent too many years truly being a people pleaser, trying to tone myself down. And then I spent a long time deconstructing that so I could be happy with who I am. In fact, just in May, no, it was in August, a former friend, reached out to me with this really nasty text message, basically saying if I wanted to come camping with them, I had to tone it down because she could only take me in spurts. And she realized later how nasty it was, and she was in the wrong. However, we sat down to talk about it, and I said, look, not only can't I won't. I've spent way too many years trying to fit in with everybody, realizing I am unique. I'm different than other people. I'm direct. I am in touch with who I am. I don't pull any punches. As somebody said to me, I give 0 Fs. And that's really how I am. Inside, I often care what other people think. But even when that happened in this past year, I just moved to a new place and had to make new friends. And so it was a whole other level of me getting to know who I was and feeling rooted. And that's the experience I want other people to have, is you're so rooted and at home with who you are. Doesn't matter what people say, you know who you are, and you don't need anybody else's approval.
Yeah, well, this is very strong. And I see this very often, that people, as soon as they get some critics, they think, oh, something is wrong with me. But often this is only projection someone else has and is putting this on us. And of course, sometimes we resonate with this, and this helps us to evolve, to even become better, I will always call it like stripping the onion, finding another layer to understand us deeper and deeper and deeper. But like really being dependent on the opinion of others, this will always kind of make us small, or make us feel like we are not good enough, or we are fraud, or whatever it is. So how can we really step into our own self, like really owning who we truly are? How do you help people coming to this kind of stage?
Yeah, a couple of things that you said that struck me. I no longer call it stripping away the onion. I now call it peeling back the artichoke, because at the center of an artichoke is its heart. And I feel like when people are really at home with themselves, they're living in their heart and aren't afraid to share their heart and show their heart and connect with people. I also tell my clients, what other people say about you is none of your business. What you say about you, make it your business. So it really is mastering, separating, starting off, I call it cracking the power code of personal responsibility. We've got to start with, whenever we're disempowered or upset, no matter what it is, there's some story we've made up about ourselves, about others, or somebody says something to us and it confirms a fear we have about ourselves in our head, right? So as you said, it's a reflection. So they're either intimidated by our ability to feel free because they don't feel free, or sometimes people are saying things that are a reflection of our own energy and giving voice to fears we have inside. So it's important to discern between the two. What I often tell people is, number one, when you're disempowered, grab a journal with a pen, not your computer, because it works a different part of your brain, and just write out the thing you're upset about, what somebody said, why they're a jerk, the whole thing, write, you know. And if you're somebody, sometimes people hate journaling. I say put 2 minutes on a timer and just make yourself write for 2 minutes so the brain knows it has an end in sight. At the end of that, go back and circle just the facts. You're going to find there's 3 or 5. The rest is the brain making up a story about the information it's perceiving to feel comfortable. And when we can separate fact from fiction in that moment, we're present. And when we're present, we have presence of mind, body, soul, and spirit. Mind to think clearly, body to embody the kind of leader we want to be, soul to speak our truth, and spirit to guide and move through us. That's a discernment process that you can master for the rest of your life. That's what mastery is. Mastery isn't about, this isn't about getting to an end state. It is saying, okay, I'm going to learn to unpack every time someone says or thinks something negative about me. I'm going to really take a look and I'm going to consider it. Nope, don't agree. What feeling is this drawing up in me? Is that fear? Is it worry? What's going on? That will lead you to start to trust yourself more when we trust ourselves more and trust our intuition and that internal guidance, because we have the answers. We just sometimes need a good coach to ask the right questions, but we can, when we learn to trust ourselves, then we're at home. But it is an ongoing revealing of the heart, as it were.
Mm. Yeah, and often it is only, I would call it something like an echo of something that is an imprint we got, for example, during our childhood. So
Yep.
it definitely has nothing to do with the situation per se at this moment, but it's like, okay, the body and the mind remembers, okay, I had kind of this situation when I was young and that this had whatever consequences. So this is just the echo coming again and again and again. So is it necessary to step back into our childhood or where the root of the problem is to eliminate and clear that? Or do you think it is also possible to start in this moment where this happens and this echo resonates somehow with us?
I would say it's both. I would say if when something happens and you notice you have an unwanted emotion or unwanted response, you're disempowered, use that tool of separating fact from fiction. If it goes away and doesn't come back, good. But if it's a recurring theme, then it's important to start to investigate the crime scene, as I like to say. You know, who's at fault? What are the clues you're uncovering? And what I say to people is there an earlier similar incident? Is there an earlier similar incident? Did that person who you got activated by, did they remind you of somebody? And generally, when I work with people that way, I can find a moment that actually defined this behavior, something as simple as I was working with a client at a retreat I held at the end of January, and she has been at her company 35 years, okay? Wonderful woman. And her boss, the owner, is about to retire, really wants her to take over, began talking to her about it 3 years ago, and she was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And there's another guy in the company who it's clear he's vying for the position, and she's worried because she is very, the distinction between CEO energy and entrepreneurial energy. CEO energy, foundational, making the trains run on time, consistency, standard operating procedures, entrepreneurial, big thinking, out there, visionary, leading the way. She's the CEO energy, really. He's the visionary entrepreneurial energy. She's worried that if he takes over, the culture of the company is going to suffer. So we're doing work together, and I now refer to it as barf gate or vomit gate. What happened was we went through a meditation where I led her down to an earlier similar, and what she got to was when she was 5. She was maybe pre-K or kindergarten here in the States, maybe first grade. She didn't feel good. She told her teacher her stomach was upset, and her teacher ignored her. And her teacher was handing out a paper, a worksheet, and put it on the desk in front of her, and Heidi vomited all over the paper. And her teacher yelled at her about that. And Heidi, in her mind, decided people in charge are mean. I never want to be in charge. When she recognized this and we identified this brain pattern that had been established when she was 5, she also recognized she's been a champion of the underdog. That's who she became. And so she's head of human resources for her company. And people always say, I just got fired by Heidi, but I feel so good because she was so caretaking of people. And when we were able to disrupt that and uncollapse it, would you know, she, on the lunch break, called her boss, said she wanted a meeting the next day. Her boss wasn't in the company, but she met with the entrepreneurial energy guy. They had a 3-hour meeting. They devised a plan to co-CEO the company and went to their boss on Monday and said, we're going to be taking over and here's how. And her boss couldn't be happier. Though that small moment unlocked her future. And so when we have a recurring block to owning our power, then I say yes. It's important to go back for that imprint, but it's never traumatic or dramatic. It's always these small, what I found is these small innocuous moments that the brain has made up such a story, and then it's a habitual way of thinking, and a belief is a habit of the mind. A belief is simply a thought you've had so many times you think it's true. And our beliefs aren't true. They're just a way of thinking that we've had that has become habitual for us.
Yeah, wow. What an amazing story you just shared. And I love the term like investigating the crime, because this is something, I use the term spiritual forensics, but it goes into the same direction. Like it is in the invisible field. It is like here a piece and there a piece, and like a puzzle, you can't see the whole picture. But as soon as you start to investigate, and then at the end you can understand, okay, this is a story we made up, and this was the situation I have been in, and now it's in the conscious mind. Now I can change it, and I can decide if I want to behave the same way, want to continue with this pattern, or if I can interrupt and figure out, okay, what if I have the choice, how would I like to behave in a different way? And therefore we change our life for certain. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I would guess that in the work you do, epigenetics comes into play too, because people can be born in this lifetime carrying memories of their ancestors in their DNA. And often that's not something that comes up for me, but probably in the work that you do, it does. And we don't even realize it. Jewish guilt on my end of, it's imprinted in me. I didn't start out that way, but it is in my genes. And so how do I get rid of that and get rid of the Jewish guilt or Catholic guilt if you're Catholic, that kind of thing. So there's so many ways that people are born into these moments as well.
Absolutely. And I can see this as well coming from my ancestral line. Like my grandmother has been in 2 world wars, my father in 1 world war. So for them, it was a pattern that they created wealth and lost everything because they had to flee out of the country because everything was destroyed by bombs, like houses. And so they have been in this situation, like not creating something, and then what is essential, what can I take with me, like having it in my backpack. And so I've heard this story over and over again. So I have seen this pattern in my life as well. I'm excellent in creating my own business, and then everything is destroyed again. Of course, now I cleared this out, but becoming aware of, okay, where does this come from? So this is definitely a wealth pattern giving over from one generation to the other one.
Yeah.
Things like not having enough food, for example. When my grandmother died, I went into her house and she had the full cellar full of self-made pickles. She had a freezer where you can put in a whole pig, and it was full. So I think she had food in the cellar for 20 years. And my father had the same pattern, like always the storage area was full with food, and I never have my fridge empty. So I can see this, but I think it is important to understand if there is something like this kind of pattern that is going over from one generation to the other one, how this still can influence your own behavior.
Absolutely. And as you were sharing the fear, I could experience fear of your grandmother and your father, and even choosing which of your belongings you take because you knew everything's going to be gone. And I also thought of my own grandmother when she passed away. What was in her freezer but loaves of banana bread and jars of homemade applesauce, because she had a very rough childhood, was abused as a kid. In fact, was beaten so bad, the neighbors called the cops. And she was born in 1906. And around 1913, the neighbors called the cops, which was unheard of because her mother had beaten her so bad in the ear, she went deaf in one ear. And then she wound up in a orphanage. And so as kids growing up, she wanted to make sure all the kids were taken care of, the family was taken care of, because she wasn't. So she had these things that she knew would please the family. I don't think it was fear of her going hungry. It was fear of her family not feeling cared for because she didn't feel cared for. And it's amazing even just hearing the story, we might not have that memory, but just hearing the story, how that impacts our own patterning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because so much of this information is either in our subconscious mind or on soul level, we don't have conscious access to that. But
yeah,
we often can see pattern. We can see how this shows up into our life. And if it is like imposter syndrome or not willing to step out of our comfort zone in any kind of way, this is visible. Like we don't want to make, or we don't feel that we are brave enough to make a change or to step out of this comfort zone.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I see the same thing.
So how can we empower people to, if they are aware, okay, this is happening in my life, and perhaps worked on their beliefs and on their blockages, how can we empower them to really step into what they truly are, and perhaps also what they're meant to be here on this planet?
I think, it's that age-old adage of you're a combination of the 5 people you surround yourself with. I think when we train and develop ourselves to be at home with ourselves, we have more space for other people to be themselves, or to realize that their behavior has nothing to do with us. And the more we can support one another to live true to ourselves, the more we can also call each other out in that space of saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't you. What's going on? I can tell something's off. What's happening? But it really, you can't call somebody else out unless you're at home in your own body with your own soul. So it's doing that deep internal investigation and practicing not taking things personally and realizing that other people's responses to you have nothing to do with you. And I also think being in a state of ongoing wonder and curiosity and wondering about situations or people and being curious rather than jumping to conclusions and assuming the worst from people. So I think those are other ways of being that we can, because we are human beings. It's not always about do, right? We can be curious. We can be in wonder. We can be thankful. Yes, people talk about being grateful. And I always tell people, look, I'm a big fan of positive affirmation, but if I'm ticked off, I want to throat punch someone. I do not have room right then for positive affirmation because the amygdala is taken over. So also have space and grace for yourself to have human emotions and reactions.
Yeah, of course. This is, and our reptilian brain sometimes just starts working, and as we can't fight, flight, or freeze perhaps, but we are in a situation where we can't fight, we can't punch our CEO in the face, or start screaming, and often we are in a meeting, we can't just leave. So we have to handle this kind of situations. And I think this is also, of course, getting aware that, okay, now my reptilian brain is triggered. I feel this emotion coming up of fear or aggression, or like, I can't move anymore, I'm frozen. But then what can we do to come out? So whatever works, like breathing, tapping, whatever you can do in this kind of situation. You can tap as well under the table so that nobody is seeing that. But having also a strategy to just come out of this kind of situation so that your conscious mind is able to take over.
Yeah, well, I think, the amygdala is that reptilian part of your brain. And we all know that when our reptilian part of the brain or the amygdala is taking over, our reasoning and logical brain goes down, which is causing that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's another one that I've recently come to know, where you become the consummate people pleaser and you don't stand up for yourself. So depending on the situation, I think number 1, 5 deep breaths, which you mentioned. Sure, you can tap under the table. If you're in a meeting and you experience that and you're able to take a quick bathroom break, I tell people to go in the bathroom and silently scream into their hands, breath, sound, and movement. Hands over mouth, bent over, screaming into your hands and like wobbling back and forth just to give your cells a little shake, because that's an emotional release. And what's happening is, because we have gray matter in our cells, if we haven't moved that emotional energy through our body, when we get triggered, that's why it reminds us of an earlier similar incident. So that's one thing to do. But also sometimes, I don't know that everybody feels like they have agency in the moment to say, you know what, I need to take a pause. And I want to come back to this conversation because I want to give it some thought before I respond. Would that be okay? I think that's all comes down to our relationship to authority and how we perceive authority. Well, my boss called me in his office and he wants an answer to this. Yes, but your boss also wants a thoughtful answer. I notice I want to answer right away, but I want to give it some thought. Can I get back to you in half an hour via email with what I think? I had a situation like this happen just 2-3 days ago. My financial advisor called me and it was 6:30 at night. And once 6 o'clock happens, I'm done. I'm so full up of meetings and Zoom. I just want to have my dinner, work out if I'm going to do that, meditate, get my evening on, but I answered the phone. That was my first mistake. Oh, I should. It's my financial advisor. He starts asking me questions and I noticed I'm hangry because I'm hungry. And I noticed I'm getting angry. And I know it's completely disproportionate to this wonderful person who's been my financial advisor for over 25 years. And I just said, you know what? I said, I think I need to hang up the phone because I'm hangry. And I notice I'm having a reaction that is completely disproportionate to what you're saying. So let me hang up and I'll get back to you tomorrow. He was like, okay. And we had a great conversation yesterday where we sorted everything out. And I said, I apologize. I had to do that. He goes, no problem. I'm glad you said something. And we've been working together long enough that I know you know yourself to get off the call. So I also think it's our relationship to authority and feeling like we have the agency to ask for a pause, to step out, to say to somebody, I don't know, let me get back to you. And that also is really important. I used to work on Capitol Hill for a member of Congress, and I was new, just moved to DC. It's my first job on the Hill. It's a big thing. And I'm worried, what if I don't know the answer? What if somebody finds out? Our chief of staff used to go home this is why one of the reasons I got out of politics, because the hours were insane. And you had pride in how many hours you worked. People were sleeping under their desks. It was ridiculous. So this is 8 o'clock at night. He'd leave the office with a stack of material. He'd go home, read it to get prepped for meetings the next day. And I would sit in those meetings. I also would have done the same thing. And somebody would ask a question. I would know the answer, but he would never retained it in the way I would. And he would say, or maybe he just didn't want to answer. He would say, you know what? I don't know. Let me look back over the material and think about it. Would that be okay if I got back to you? And they were always fine with it. I think we also shy away from saying, I don't know. But if you say, I don't know right now, I want to give it some thought. Let me get back to you in half an hour, tomorrow, later today. I think that also gives the other person's brain a break to say, okay, she's going to get back to me. I don't have to be worried about the outcome. Or your boss may say, actually, I need you to give me an answer right now. Okay, well, give me just a couple minutes to gather my thoughts. Can you ask the question again? You just need to find these tools to calm the central nervous system so that your logical mind can take over and you can realize your boss asking the question or a manager or whatever it is isn't to put you on the spot. They're probably just asking a question.
Yeah, amazing ideas. And I think they are easy to practice. No? Of course, perhaps at the beginning, you really, be a little bit brave and try it out. But you will have definitely a change in your life when you use this kind of tactics and try it out. Yeah. Another thing you said was like being authentical and really being home in ourselves is also important as figuring out who is in our environment. So in some situation, we can be really who we are. In some situation, perhaps we have to play a role, but depending who is in our environment, where are we located, does this really support us to really speak out who we truly are? What do you think about the aspect of who am I and what is my best environment, depending on, of course, location, but also people I surround myself with?
I think a couple of things. I think so going back to that story I said about this person who said, you're just too much. You know, how many of us have been told we're too much, and this whole myth of too much? Number one, I can't stand that. But let's say you walk into a situation and you know you're somebody who enters the room, you kind of command a presence. I'm like that. You're probably like that. It's just a way of being because we are at home with ourselves and people can tell. Well, if other people are, if you have a boss or somebody that needs to be front and center, one of the things you can do is be responsible for your presence and not dial it back, but choose to take a back seat. But that's in choice. That's not in reaction. That's consciously saying, okay, right now I'm in second place on purpose because this is where I'm going to learn to lead from the back. And I'm going to elevate my boss or whomever at the front of the room. Or sometimes you may choose to say, you know what, I'm going to be direct with you. I don't think you're the right person to lead this meeting. I'm the right person to lead this meeting because we need people to feel at home when we're giving and safe when we're giving bad news. And I'm much better able to do that than you are. So I think we're all playing roles. You know, I'm going to visit my folks this weekend and I know my dad is anxious. I will predict for you that on the 3.5-hour drive home, I will get a call from him. Where are you? How close are you? How long till you get here? Even if I have sent him a text, I'm leaving now and he knows I'm going to be there in 3.5 hours. I used to react in a very, why are you following up on me? I know what I'm doing. I've driven a car before. Now I just get, he's my dad and I'm going to play the role of daughter and say, oh, I've got an hour left. Or I'm almost there, or I'm on, you know, I just got on 95 or whatever the highway is, because I'm choosing to allow him at 86 years old to be my daddy. And I'm choosing at 58 years old to still be his little girl for as long as I have him. You know, so I think what we have to do is be able to discern our choice and be conscious and powerfully choose the role we're playing. The problem is often we don't. And we wind up being at being, I'm using air quotes, being at the effect of others, but that's all a perception. There's always times when we feel victimized or we feel like we've been made to feel a particular way, but nobody can make you feel a particular way. Quiet the mind, get present to what your thoughts are and your emotions are, move the energy through your body and choose how you're going to show up in any given situation. And then be careful that you're not overcompensating and not being yourself because you're afraid of the criticism. As you said when we started the podcast, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but what I got from what you said was, you know, so often when we are ourselves, the fear is people aren't going to like us. It's true. Some people won't. That's okay. Those aren't your people. Get new people, you know, choose not to be connected with them. Choose something else. You know, I'm also reminded of a dear friend I've been friends with for 25 years. She gets mad at the like things that are incomprehensible to me. If I have to change a plan, I had to change a plan because I'm sick. She really hasn't talked to me since. I was ill. I don't understand, but I'm just letting her get happy in the same pants she got sad in because I'm choosing to be her friend. And when she's happy, she'll reach out. And we'll go from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I've had the situation definitely during the last 2.5 years that I spoke out my truth and I don't expect anybody to step into my reality. I just shared what I think about some things. And I've seen a lot of people saying, okay, no, I don't want to be with you anymore because no, I don't have the same opinion. And I think, okay, but if you don't have the same opinion, let's have a discussion. Let's figure out, no, let me understand your perspective. I'm just sharing mine. And yeah, but what I figured out that some things became very strict in what we are able to share or what we are allowed to share and others are not. And so then with the process of my own personal development and spiritual growth, figuring out, will I step back because people are leaving me or becoming weird around me, or will I stand with my truth? And I decided for myself, I am the one that I choose to be, and I'm authentic in what I'm sharing. I'm standing for my own truth. And this is, if people want to work with me, they are not getting like a hidden person. So
Right.
people know that I'm connected to spirituality. They know about my background in science and business, and they know that I'm speaking out my own truth. And
Yeah.
they can like it or not, but I'm open for freedom of speech, and I'm open for having different perspectives to figure out, okay, perhaps there are facts I have never noticed, that I was not aware of. So please share that with me.
Yeah.
But I'm not like the, how can I say, the cat in the box. Yeah, so I'm, what do you
Yeah.
think
I mean,
about
I think it takes something and probably took something from you to get where you are today, where you can feel comfortable to express an opinion and hear that somebody else has a different opinion and be curious about that. And then the question is, well, you have a opinion that's different than mine, that's maybe vastly different than yours. Do we continue to be in alignment together, to creatively align? I feel like when people are aligned, you think the same way, you're along the same river. When you're creatively aligned, you're like, well, I still want to work with you. I don't agree with you about that, but I get that's your opinion and that's your integrity. That's you being true to you based on that opinion. And I can then creatively align and say, you know what? Yes, I want to walk with you along this path in this way, understanding that our viewpoints are distinct. But that leaves people at choice about that. If you were to hide who you are, people wouldn't have had that choice about working with you, relating to you, et cetera. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I would like to jump a little bit back because you said, okay, there is a moment when you actively step into a role like being a child to your father when you visit him. Um, what was your situation during your childhood? Because I read, of course, through the pre-interview form, and I figured out that, yeah, there have been also some situations that were kind of giving you some steps to who you truly are now because of what happened to you in this childhood. Can you go a little bit into that? What were some moments where you said this was important to go through so that I got stronger and I really stepped into my own authenticity?
Yeah, I think my whole childhood was like that. You know, my parents split up when I was 11. And I mean, even before then, I was 5'7" in ninth grade. So I was towering over everybody else. So even as a little kid, I was towering over the other kids. So I stood out that way. I was the only Jew in my school in Michigan. And so I stood out that way. My parents split when I was very young. And back then, you know, this is like 1976. There weren't a lot of divorced people in the States. It was kind of a new thing. So I stood out that way. And my mom joined something called Parents Without Partners, PWP, and we got to know other kids of divorced parents because we were such a unicorn. Like that was just unheard of. And then I grew up with two separate sets of parents, but in like retrofitting, what did you call it? A retro, what was the word that you use? Retro forensics. In looking for that, what I realized was when my parents were still together, my father always had anger issues and he's gone to therapy and he's tons better now. But my mom was like, better clean up before dad gets home. She kind of fed into that. Like we have to make sure everything's okay before dad comes home so he doesn't get angry. And I became this peacemaker, trying to make peace between my mom and my dad and my brother and my mom and me and my brother. And that's when I began to turn myself inside out to be the good little girl and try to get along. And then through junior high and high school, I even remember having a group of girlfriends where, and all women went through this, out of the blue, they just stopped talking to you. You don't know what you did, but you weren't the cool kid that day. And again, feeling like an other or outside of it. And retrospectively, I can see now where that people-pleasing tendency came into being. And I can now choose to do that, or I can choose to say, you know what, you got to stand up for you and do what works for you and quit worrying about other people. And in fact, my uncle just said that to me when I was visiting him and my aunt in November. He has a very thick New England accent, so I can't really do it justice. But he was like, Jennifer, you know, why are you so sensitive? Why you got to care about what other people say? Do you do you, you know, things like that. So that was part of my childhood and kind of growing up, of always feeling like I was an outsider. How much of that was my own story, or how much of that was, no, I was unique. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an actor. I was very expressed. I still am, sing, and used to do dance class, went to acting school as a little kid, was in productions. And then at some point chose not to follow that, but I always felt a little distinct and different. I think the choice, I went to college when I was 16, just turning 17. I was much younger than everybody else, which kind of had me grow up probably quicker than I needed to. And sexually active way earlier than I probably was comfortable with, because everybody else was, and everybody else was older than I was. And I so was very much kind of a go along to get along, until that whole role that I was playing was bankrupt. Because when you learn to be a chameleon, when you learn to be a peacemaker, to deal with your circumstances, you don't know who you are. And the problem is, neither does anybody else. So there's an air of not knowing quite how to trust you. So the more I came into my own and came into who I was, and that process probably started around 1996, when I began to do really intense personal growth and development work. Whew, it was a lot more calming. I was way more peaceful, and it was much easier to be around.
Yeah, wow, what a story. And I think it is important to see that, like you, often women went through a story, and this was such a strong imprint for them to become strong and authentic, and do the things they really need to do in this life right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
yeah.
It's interesting what you bring up, because most of the women that I coach are probably in their 40s or older. And they always come to me when they're at this kind of what they call their midlife crisis. They're like, okay, I'm thinking about retirement now. The kids are finally grown and out of the house. What's my next iteration? Who am I now? And what's the legacy I'm going to leave? And I tell them it's not a midlife crisis. It's a soul life crisis. That the soul, somewhere around the age of 42, if you aren't fulfilling your purpose, starts knocking at your door and going, hello, it's time. We're going to really mess things up for you so that we can guide you, because you haven't been listening, and we're going to get you onto the right path. And in my spiritual belief, if we don't learn the lessons that we choose to learn when we incarnate, we're going to do it again in the next lifetime,
Yeah, and I like this term, that it is not a midlife crisis, but it is really bringing us into our connection to our soul, and understanding what is the legacy we want to leave on this planet. And don't come back doing the same thing again. So
exactly. You're going to be in trouble if you do that. We're going to keep giving you the same lessons. It's kind of like 2020, I was in August of 2020, I found a lump in my breast and was subsequently diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm fine now, but I distinctly remember 2 weeks earlier sitting on my balcony in the sun one morning, drinking my coffee and thinking, I'm exhausted. I can't keep going like this. And boom, I had to slow down. And that was kind of, I knew that I had gotten nudges from spirit to slow down, to not work as hard, to just allow things to flow, to receive, to be in that divine feminine energy. And finally it was like, thunk. No, now we're making you slow down. And since that time, I rearranged my day. I rearranged how I organized my day. And I've kept it the same, where the mornings are mine. And I don't talk to clients or do things like this before 10 a.m. my time, because I want to exercise and meditate and stare out the window and count the birds that are coming, to my bird feeder. It's just what makes my heart sing. So why not?
Wow, I totally hear you, because for me, I was in a burnout about 7 years ago, really like from the outside having a jet set life, living in trains and planes and hotels. But inside, it was like, I can't do this any longer. And until my body said, okay, you are not listening. You are not exercising. You are not eating healthy anymore. You're working against your own values. So you get the punch in your face, burnout. Yeah, and it was really like, okay, there was no discussion anymore. I really had to change. And so now 5 years ago, I went to Madeira, left Germany, and I have a totally different lifestyle. And
I bet you do. Beautiful lifestyle. That's how I feel about living here in Annapolis, because I can walk 10 minutes and be at the beach. You know, I can put my feet in the sand if it's warm enough out and look at the bay. The Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the U.S., and I can see the waves lapping and see the boats out there. And when I'm connected to the water, whew, it's night and day for me.
Yeah. I'm totally getting that. So the beach is my favorite place as well, having the feet in the water. And here in Madeira, we can almost the whole year have a swim in the ocean as well. So,
oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So I'm sure people now got super, super interested about what you're doing. And how can they reach out to you? Do you have some social media, or how can they can come in contact with you?
Yeah, you can find out more about me. You can go to my website, www.jencoken.com. Lots of resources on there. In fact, under the resources tab, there is a link to a monthly Empower Hour that I lead, where it's run like a webinar. There's some, I do pick 2 people to get coached. And so when you register for it, it's generally the last Tuesday of the month from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern or New York time. You fill in a little box that says, what's your challenge right now in 100 words or less? And I'll read through it and I'll pick 2 people to live coach. So you potentially can get live coaching. And if you don't, I follow up with a worksheet. And if you want to talk a little bit, we can. There's also a Udemy course called Making Imposter Syndrome Your Superpower, which is the course I've been leading for years now with people to get to their defining moment and understand and disrupt imposter syndrome. I also on there have a list of 18 hours of podcasts that I've done on imposter syndrome. And honestly, if somebody is interested, and my programs are on there so you can look. I work with people in group or one-on-one, but you can also just reach out to me via email, jen@jencoken.com, JENCOKEN.com. So it's all similar. And on LinkedIn, it's Coken. So that's the best way to grab me on social is LinkedIn. I send out a monthly newsletter and usually post a few times a week. So.
Okay, I will put all the links in the show notes so that it is easy just to click and
perfect.
Connect with you.
Great.
Last but not least, is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think what I want to say to people who are listening is don't be afraid to be yourself. It is scary in the beginning because we're not trained to be ourselves. We're trained to fit in and be who we think other people want us to be. And that's not even conscious training. It's just what happens in our education. But the more you can take some time to be still, linked to your heart and your soul, you'll begin to really get to know who you are. And if you need help, reach out to me, reach out to Swanette. I'm sure either one of us could help you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you today, and hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you, Swanette, so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, Spiritual-Changemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual-Changemakers-Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.